Hello, everybody. My name's James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the audio, you're listening to Ask James on a regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. This week, Ask James on a Wednesday. Clayton's got some family matters today. I hope he's well if he's listening or watching. So the Clayton James show is tomorrow, and Clash of Correspondence with Lewis James and Rory McLaughlin Dowd on Fulham against Crystal Palace will be out early for you on Friday morning. So we've changed the schedule a little bit this week, hence Ask James is now on a Wednesday. I've got nothing particular to announce, so I'm just going to go through the questions as per usual in order of submission up to 12 p.m. UK time. Timestamp this, it's just gone 5 past 11. Solomon Campbell is up first, says, is Brendan Rodgers the best British manager this century? After Sir Alex Ferguson, criminally underrated still. He's better than the likes of Iraola, who are flavour of the month currently. Would you take him? I don't know why I mentioned Iraola when he's not British. In terms of British managers, I mean, you make a case for even the likes of David Moyes, maybe. Wow, trying to think. Harry Redknapp. Yeah, I guess in terms of British managers, he'd be up there, but I don't think we've got a huge number of names to choose from. Off the top of my head, I can't think of that many that's coming to me at this moment, but Gareth Southgate's name goes in there. Eddie Howe, maybe. Plenty of managers perhaps achieved coming up from lower leagues into the Premier League. So Eddie Howe's a good example. It's doing well at Newcastle at the moment. So I guess for his achievements at Celtic, yeah, I guess Brendan Rodgers probably would be up there. I think you get very mixed opinions on him if you speak to Leicester fans, but I also think we're putting him in a category that would be so many levels below Sir Alex Ferguson. I mean, a huge number of levels below, and actually his name possibly comes into the conversation here because there aren't a huge number of alternatives. It's quite interesting. That's a fair question, Solomon. Don't know why we've got Iraola in there. Would I take Brendan Rodgers? No. I think he's quite vain. I think he's the sort of man who likes to spend a bit of time in front of the mirror. I've said that regularly over the years. So, no. For Celtic, were extremely unlucky last night. I watched the second half. And then they played really well in sort of the opening quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. They nicked a goal. I say nicked a goal. A little bit harsh, but they hadn't had an effort on goal for about an hour. It's very well taken by Nicholas Kuhn, although Kim Min-jae should deal with that so much better. But yeah, they were very unlucky not to make extra time. But the game was also taking a pattern where I wasn't fearing for Bayern. I was watching if this goes to extra time. I think Bayern were beginning to show their fitness levels were a level above in the final 10 minutes or so, which is perfectly understandable. It was a great effort from Celtic. Aidan says, morning James, I have an Eze problem with minutes being limited of late. Would you sell for Nwaneri or a Bournemouth midfielder rolling through game week 29 if that helps? The problem with Eze is that I think we're kind of aware that he's probably carrying a little bit of an injury since he's had from mid-December. The appeal of obviously running through is obviously the Ipswich and Southampton fixtures either side of game week 29. I think with someone like Mateta, you're more inclined to think, okay, I carry that through. Eze less so at the moment. So yes, probably would move on. And yes, Bournemouth players probably top of the shop because that will carry you great for a number of weeks, at least up to game week 33, you would think. Steve R says, hi mate, one free transfer, slot to another manager or keep slot, do Pedro to Cunha. Both for a hit. Cheers, like and sub, guys. Yeah, thank you, Steve. If you're watching live or on repeat, a sub and a subscription goes a really long way. If you listen to the audio 5-star review, also goes a very long way as well. The problem with João Pedro is if you think he starts this week, it's Southampton away. But on Brighton's performance on Friday night, I think it would be every reason to anticipate that Rutter and Welbeck would remain the two and Mitoma and Minter would play in the wide positions. So I think priority for me, yes, would probably be to move that on to Cunha. From a fixture perspective, that doesn't look ideal this weekend, but I think you'll feel safer in the knowledge you're carrying Cunha for a while. Another one, Wolves fixture is about to become really good. Cunha's going to be so popular. So I think, yeah, you're probably going to be a week or two ahead of others who want to go to Cunha. So yes, it would be that. Would a move slot for a hit? I don't think there's enough good alternatives to think that's great. Let's think of it this way. If, let's say Liverpool draw 2-2 at City, what do you get for that for slot? Is that 5 points, is it, I think? 3 for the draw plus a point for each goal. Whereas if you went to, say, Arteta for a hit and they won, let's say, 2-0, I don't think it's reasonable to expect Arsenal to be posting huge volumes of goals at the moment. Let's say they won 2-0. You got 6, 8, clean sheet, was that 10.5 on top, remove 4-point hit with 1 point up. Now, obviously, if you take the hit and you go for Glasner, if Villa don't win tonight and Palace win, obviously you're going to be nearer the 20-point mark, and obviously it becomes worth it. I think for many, I'm sure there's going to be a number of assistant manager questions. I think, unfortunately, it's probably not landed great. You were probably hoping to have one of Guardiola or Howe for bonus points, and there's neither. I'd arguably just stick with slot. Unless you truly think Liverpool get beat at the weekend, I'd probably just leave it on slot. I definitely don't think I'd be taking a hit to move it. Darren Jenkins says, morning, James. Already have Cliver. This may not sound as crazy as would a month ago. Would you play Utara over Palmer and double up Bournemouth versus Wolves? Chelsea looks so bad at the moment. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think you definitely want to play your Bournemouth guys. Totally understand that. I guess the more the point would be, are all of your attacking players, your other 7, are they all better than Palmer? Villa have suffered in fixtures at weekends after they played midweek. It's well documented that their league results after Champions League games is not great. And they've obviously got a big game tonight against Liverpool. Now, obviously, it's not a Champions League game, but it's a Champions League level opponent, no doubt. So I'd probably still want to play Palmer this weekend. I'll give you an example. I think I could... I've obviously got 2 big problems, Amad Diallo and Cody Gakpo, right? So I'm liable to go one or the other. Diallo to Kluivert or Gakpo to Cunha. Now, I could do both for the -4, and on the face of it, you go, that's probably right there, James, -4. But it then becomes effective -4, probably for Cunha, over whichever player I bench instead. Now, for me, that would probably be Morgan Rogers. So would I be taking a -4 for Cunha over Rogers this specific week, considering what we said about Chelsea? No. But the reason I bring that up is I'd still be playing Palmer. And I don't think that would be too much of a deliberation to bench him, actually. For me, if Cole Palmer has a good weekend ahead of playing Southampton and Leicester at home, it'd be all the rage again. And although Chelsea obviously have hit the kind of skids a little bit recently, not played well, they'll have had 8 days to prepare for this, as opposed to Aston Villa's 3. And if Chelsea do well with Jackson unavailable, you do feel that Palmer's got to be involved. So no, I would want to be playing Cole Palmer in nearly all circumstances. In relation to your 2 Bournemouth players, yeah, if you've got them, yeah, I think you probably do play him over Cole Palmer. But I'm not convinced that Palmer would be the worst of your 8 attackers. I'll tell you what, Darren, tag me on Twitter or Blue Sky and let me know. Show me a screen grab of your team. Luke Boy 123 says, hi James. Feels like a big decision for many this week. Is it worth taking out Slot or Emery for a free transfer? Have a good day, mate. Yeah, it's not landed great, unfortunately. It was one of my fears behind the game week 24 was the regular question, what do you do in 26? As discussed on Monday's pod, of those that can have bonus, actually Leicester are the shortest price to win, to pick up that bonus this week. It just doesn't feel great, does it? Ultimately, if Emery beats Chelsea at home, and as just discussed, they've got problems, you're looking at, say, a 9-10 pointer or so, you might be throwing them points away. Also, what's the value of holding this transfer considering you're about to come into a blank game week? Now, that might be a little bit dependent on what you're doing, but I think don't necessarily overlook the value of having the transfer. The assistant manager chip, and obviously jumping between managers, is a very, very viable strategy if you can foresee the gain there. I think a little bit like with players at the moment, if you're really deliberating it, maybe the best thing to do is go, no, do you know what? It's not going to be for me. Is it that impossible that like Liverpool or Villa win this weekend? Like, it's not, is it? I think Liverpool are still projected to have sort of like the 5th. I saw Rob T's tweet earlier with the goal projections for the weekend. I think Liverpool was still about 5th in terms of ranks for, say, the highest scorers this weekend. Now, of course, against City, obviously, there's a good chance City get goals as well. I'd probably just leave it. Villa will probably be favourites now against Chelsea. I can't say I'd check the odds on that particular game. I don't think there's enough confidence in something else to move it. If it were me, if Villa don't win tonight, if I was to move it, I'd probably chase Glasner. But I don't know if things like Slot to Arteta are worth it. Arteta probably is like 9-10 points, great. But like I said, if Slot got, say, a 2-2 draw, still 5, gain 4 points or so. I don't know. Is that transfer going to be worthwhile more to give you a player in a blank game week or something? It might be. So again, subject to what you're doing, I'd arguably just stick, I think. Darren Jenkins says, if you still have the assistant manager, bench boost and free hit, surely assistant manager should be used from 35 onwards. That's a question. Other two best to use in 33 and 34, running through 29. Your expert opinion, please, James. It's not an expert opinion, but I'll happily give and obviously share my opinion. Tell you what I noticed. A really, really odd one here. I don't know if I want to say this yet. I'm considering wildcarding in game at 29. I'm not going to make a decision on that till 28. Now, remember, very importantly for me, all I've got left is wildcard and assistant manager. But I looked at, I'm trying to think about the box ways where I can make gains in different ways, because I have to play different to most others like yourself, Darren, who's obviously in a stronger position with these chips. And I did look at a couple of different paths of wildcard in 29. And I tell you what, both of them landed pretty good where you'd go, I could bench boost here in 30. And then play the assistant manager chip 31 to 35. And then free hit 34. Sorry, not 31 to 35. 31 to 33. And then free hit 34 if you needed it. It's just something wild that I landed on looking at something for myself. Now, obviously, I wouldn't be playing them other chips on the way. For me, it would just be wildcard 29, assistant manager 31 to 33. And then I've got to probably make a lot of free transfers in game week 34. And I began to look at it because I've obviously got make a lot of transfers for 29. So why not maybe look at it the other way when actually the teams worth attacking right at the end aren't hugely appealing, bar I cover this in the midweek dilemma that will be out for our advanced tier patrons later today, that Forest Brentford are the two that kind of really appeal from sort of 34 onwards, as long as they do still play each other in 34. Might not be that wild card at the end's like, what am I doing here? And I wondered if like wild carding in 29 when I'm absolutely broken, so I need to take a -8 basically from this point to get to 11 in 29. It's just something I've had a look at. And as I said, when I looked at it, I thought, geez, you could have a really good bench boost team in game week 30, possibly. With things like, say, I looked at it in terms of managing through and having, say, like Kepa and Henderson as my keepers. And then they're playing Ipswich and Southampton, respectively, in 30. And you look at the rest, it's like, hang on, I'm in game week 30, I've got something like 8 Nori on the bench here at home to West Ham and maybe like Nwanyeri at home to Fulham. Like, hang on, is this bench boostable? And it's a really, really wild way of considering it, but it's not something we covered before. It could be a very unique way of covering off the weeks. Because I do think you can certainly run from a wildcard 29 to have a decent team in 33. Decent enough to bench boost, you're not going to have 15 doublers, but you certainly can still have a good team. And you obviously prioritise teams you know have got good fixtures in 33 with that in mind. So if you were bench boosting there. So Liverpool play Leicester, Arsenal play Ipswich, City against Everton. There's a few there, you know, right, okay, if they've got singles, that's still absolutely fine. But yeah, game week 30 bench boost, if you wildcarded 29, I'm not suggesting anyone goes down that route, but I've obviously looked at it myself now. And that's probably not the right way to play it. I think ultimately bench boost for many will land in, you want to play that in the best week, and you kind of alluding to it, Darren. So it feels like, yeah, it's got to be assistant manager at the end. But is there different ways of doing it? I mean, for example, could you assistant manager 30 to 32 as a different way maybe? Now maybe you want to obviously wild card maybe to set up for a period of 33. I agree that I still think for the majority, free hit will be better used in 33 or 34, but as covered yesterday on the people's poll, I do think there's a select group, and it would probably be people like me who have got sort of like 8 players across the 4 teams who blank in 29, where just free hit in 29 will just be better. So I do think it's very dependent on the players in your team. I'll reiterate what I've said again over the last 2 podcasts, that I think ultimately the decisions should probably be locked in game week 28. And go, Darren, there's an out-the-box thinking for you. Have a look at what we've got in game week 29. Louis says, I always find part of the FPL season so draining and confusing. Kind of wish there was no blank or double game weeks. Look, they can act as a hindrance sometimes because you become too laser focused on something like, wanting to bench boost in the biggest double game week. That'll probably just be 33. But again, as covered yesterday, there are certain fixtures that we know will almost definitely be brought forward from 34 to 33, such as Manchester City versus Villa, Bournemouth versus Manchester United. If Tottenham, it's Villa consequence, as covered yesterday, and or Manchester United are still in the Europa League after the last 16 stage. But there are other fixtures, like we said with Newcastle Ipswich. We're all assuming that because Newcastle Palace has gone into 32, that Newcastle Ipswich, if postponed, they've left it open for 33. But it's also possible that they've left it open because they may need to put Arsenal against Crystal Palace there, rather than it being Newcastle Ipswich. So could Newcastle Ipswich just stay in 34? Then you've got maybe 4 teams doubling in 33. Is it that appealing? I also noted on my path, by the way, looking at this wildcard 29 idea, I noticed that the bench looked incredible in game week 32 as well when Newcastle and Palace play each other. That might also be an alternative. So I understand, Louis, and I would say if it's too confusing, simplify it for you and understand teams like Bournemouth and Wolves are about to come into it, where you go almost irrespective of the circumstance, fixtures pretty much really good up to blank game week 34. And you can still target those teams. Newcastle, another one, but Newcastle are difficult in the next few, and obviously blank 29. Then they have a great run from game week 30. City come into a great run from game week 29. Simplify it. Don't stress too much about the doubles. Have a look at the bigger picture would be the advice. Paul Cook says, good morning, James. Hope you and the family are well. I have a midfield of Salah, Palmer, Bumo, Kluivert, Semenyo. Front 3, Isak, Visser, Wood. Who to bench, please? Oof. Visser at Leicester. Bumo at Leicester. Man. Wood at Newcastle. I think it's probably that. That's grim. You know that. But I think it's possibly that, particularly if you had Lewis Hall. There might be an influence that I have Lewis Hall, so I'm thinking that. I think, I would still play Palmer over Wood this week. Ultimately, if I had to make a Bournemouth decision, that's another one. Semenyo can be so hit and miss. It rarely hauls big. But you wouldn't expect Woods. I know Woods scored a hat-trick at St James's last year. You wouldn't expect him to haul big. I think from that lot, it'd probably be Wood, Paul. Bench boost. It won't feel right, will it? Andrew Parker said, would you be willing to take hits this week to afford the players you want, to then also save more free transfers to having 29 to attack it and run through if not on free hit? I'm 0.1 now off of João Pedro and Eze to Dango Tara and Matthias Cunha. Yeah, just spoken about this. And one of the plans I look at on that video that's going to be out later is looking at buying Kluivert and Cunha now, because although it's a -4, it's only saving me a -4 that would get taken later. So it actually builds me more free transfers along the path. I take a hit, but then actually, of course, the benefit of taking the hit is it gives me another free transfer on the path. So inevitably, I'd just be taking that hit later. So yeah, if you think so, and if obviously it's going to be the difference where I think someone like Cunha, it's very difficult to look at the next few weeks and not think he's going to be raising in price. He's going to be so popular with them fixtures. Fulham, Everton, Southampton, West Ham, Ipswich, Tottenham, Manchester United, Leicester is a run from 27 to 34. Arguably the worst fixture that is Manchester United away. And it's in the double, so you might be comfortable benching him that week anyway. That's game week 33. So yeah, I think it's reasonable, Andrew. I wouldn't do it maybe necessarily just for the value, because I think there's always alternatives. So although from the players you're looking at, Dango and Cunha, maybe there's not, right? There's probably not anything cheaper than Cunha or Utara that you particularly want, but Nwaneri would maybe be an alternative to Utara. Again, there's a little bit more risk if you're looking to carry that longer term, but that's an alternative that might save you the hit. But yeah, in the case of, say, me looking at maybe Cunha Kluivert, it's difficult to think those aren't going to be the two players I want, and that may be the case for you with Utara. But Utara, I think, also falls into the Nwaneri category in terms of after the blank. There's a threat there, potentially, obviously, in Utara's case, by Evan Nilsson. Birth Media says, good day, Jimbo. Greetings from South Africa. Best strikers for now until after the blank. Playing through game week 29. Free hit 34. So, Isak definitely for me. I think then Cunha. And then I think it's a little bit dependent on sort of between Mateta, Wood. I don't include Haaland because I think just managing the value around those four players is better. And what I mean by that is you can, if Wolves say did reach the FA Cup semi and they doubled 33, you could go from Mateta's double in 32 to Cunha in 33. Consider things like that. Also, Wood's fixtures like not great now, but might appeal, say, particularly in 29, and then the next few fixtures up till the double game week are pretty good. And if they doubled in 33, you'd really want him as well. So I feel like from a structure perspective, you're probably still better off with 3 of those 4. It's not to discount Haaland. It's not even particularly to discount someone like Omar Mamouche, who might really appeal also from game week 29. I don't think you're going to be staying on a 3 all the way through. So at the moment, I'm on Isak, Mateta, and Gakpo. Gakpo probably becomes Cunha. Now that could be my 3 that runs, but I think Wood is, if I've got Isak and Mateta both blanking in 29, Wood is going to be calling at me as a potential solution, isn't it? So I think you're probably 3 from 4. You're saying at the moment you've got Isak, Vissa, Wood, right? So I think for you, you're running through 29. I think at the moment you probably ignore Mateta, and you're thinking about Cunha. Now, Vissa is great for the next couple. I'd be thinking possibly a bit rogue, and it depends obviously if you cover 29 nicely, but I'd possibly be thinking Vissa to Cunha in 28. Vissa's got Villa at home, Cunha's got Everton at home, or leave that one more for 29, or just carry that and leave that. I think that's a perfectly reasonable front 3 for you to have for game with 29. And then you might want to go, Vissa's fixtures get bad in 30. Then you might want to go Vissa to Mateta in 30 when Palace plays Southampton. So keep them other forwards in mind. I think this is a reasonable one if you've got, you don't want to move off, I think, certainly at least in the next 2. Next up is... sorry. I've half read 2 different questions. Birth Media, sorry. You possibly don't have Vissa. My eyes were drawn back to a question previously before. Sorry. Horia Grajden says, hello, James. Rodgers to Utara and slot for Glasner for a hit. Cheers for the best content out. You're very welcome, mate. Rodgers to Utara, fine. Again, I'll double down on the potential threat we think after the blank from Evan Nilsson. Glasner for a hit, no. No, ultimately, if you just went with slot, like I said, imagine it's a 2-2, feels a reasonable prediction at the weekend. Palace lose, you're what, 9 points down or so? I don't think there's enough upside in terms of the gamble. If Palace were at home, I know Palace away record's really good, but I think it's worth saying this is a little bit like the Brentford thing. So in the first half of the season, we'll see what Rory says about this on Friday. In the first half of the season, it was well documented. Brentford's home record, ridiculous. Now, there's 2 things Brentford done really well this year. One, their home record in sort of the first 3-4 months of the season was brilliant. And also, they've beaten the teams around them a lot. Their points per game against the non-expected top 8 teams is one of the best in the league. That's across all 20 teams. But the home record was so slanted, right, by the amount of easier fixtures that they had at the start of the season, right? The only top team they've beaten at home was Newcastle, and they caught Newcastle, I think, in a bad moment, right? Since then, they've lost at home to the likes of Tottenham. So I think they were one winning 5 or 6 at home, whereas before I think they were running at, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like 22 points from 24, wasn't it, at one point at home. Now, with Palace, look at the away games they've got left, right? This is the away games they've got left, Palace, for the rest of the season. Fulham, Southampton, good fixture. Manchester City, Newcastle, Arsenal, Tottenham, Liverpool. Now, from that, you've got loads of teams from the expected top 8. You've got Fulham doing really well this season. Southampton's the only easy one. So there's a slant there, right? When people are saying, Palace haven't lost away from home for 3.5 months, I think it is. And it's really good. It's amazing, right? And they have won some good games in that period. But also go and have a look at what those fixtures were. Consistency is great. It's not to downplay it. I'm just saying that their away form shows a bit better because we've got a lot of tough away games still to come, right? And we should factor that in. Do I think Slot to Glaston's worth a hit? Let me sell it to you a different way. Would you, if Gakpo was past fit, would you take a hit this week to go from Gakpo to Mateta? And I get it. It's just for 1 week as well. Just one game. Let's say Gakpo's past fit. He's available to play at City. Would you take a hit? Would you take a hit this week to go from Eze to Luis Diaz to Eze? Would you take a hit to go from Van Dijk to Munoz? Would you take any of these as hits for just 1 game week? And I realise there's a bit more power in the assistant manager chip. I completely get that. I'm not downplaying it. Even a draw, right? A draw, obviously, for Glasnow. If he gets a 2-2, that's what, 10 points or something, right? That's great. For a hit, not for me, mate. So I'd be focusing on the other transfer. Rogers to Utara is fine. I wouldn't necessarily rush that either, by the way, but I think that's fine. Matthew Kroll says, void morning, James. I presume that's meant to be good morning. Would you bench Trent, Hall or Robinson? There'd probably be a little bit of impact there on what I had from the opposing teams. So have you got Wood? Have you got Mateta? Have you got Haaland? That would have a little bit of impact for me. So I'll give you an example. I've got, arguably, I wouldn't play Levi Colwell over Trent, way to Villa, but that would be contradictory because I've got Rodgers, so I'd have Rodgers against Colwell. Similarly, I've got Castagne, but I've got Mateta. So I've got Castagne playing against Mateta, but I don't have Haaland. I don't have another City attacker. So Trent is kind of on the all-in strategy of, okay, right, I've got nothing that contradicts this. Admittedly, you could have played Trent and Cunha last week, and it's one of them rare ones where you end up with 15 players from the two. Incredible. But that's obviously something that's unlikely to happen unless both players score. So there's the influence of that. I think from what you've got, I'd want to play probably Lewis Hall first, actually. But again, there's a strong chance you've got Chris Wood. I think I'd probably still play Trent over Robinson, despite what I just said about Glasnow and Palace and the away form and stuff. I would still Trent. He scored in a fixture last season. It's not to say he'd score again, obviously, but he's capable. He might find space a little bit easier to come by. I can see Trent looking for Salah over the top of Vardiol during the course of the game. So I would probably play Trent. Paul Cook says, good morning, James. Hope you and your family are well. I think I've already covered that one, Paul. Yes, I have. Snicko says, hey, James, if running through game week 29 with 3 hit bench boost, assistant manager and wildcard left, when is best to use the assistant manager now? Original plan was wildcard 32, 33, then bench boost 34. I don't think it'd be bench boost 34, mate. But obviously can't assistant manager and wildcard together 31, 33. I've covered it already, so I'm going to skip sneak. But yeah, look at 29 maybe. It's something I've looked at which is different. It does fit them all in. Wildcard 29, bench boost 30, assistant manager 31 to 33, free hit 34. It's wild, but maybe look at it, maybe. I'm not recommending anyone does that. Remember, I'm in a situation where I have to play this game a bit differently, but that is a way of working in all the chips. There's then the excitement of playing a chip for 6 consecutive game weeks. You might enjoy it. Rhino says, morning, James. It's so dumb to me that it costs a free transfer to swap managers. Really doesn't encourage gambling. Do you think it's better to save a free transfer for a player? It's circumstantial, isn't it, my friend? I don't think it's quite black and white as that. What player is very relevant, right? I'm sitting there with Amad Diallo. There's nothing to save for, is there? He's got to go, and if he doesn't go for me now, then he's obviously going at some point. So I think it's circumstantial. I think it's quite as straightforward as that. In terms of the assistant manager and how they've set it up how they set it up, I think there was always a kind of an interesting conflict where you'd have, if you were going to move between managers, it costs you free transfer at a time of the season. Most likely you'd want to play it around blanks doubles, that where free transfers were going to be more precious, right? Johan Montin says, hi James, have gone against Palmer for some weeks with the aim to buy back for 27. Would you still buy at this point for less than Southampton or continue to bet against? I guess it depends what you're selling, right? So is that another high price ticket player like Haaland that might be useful for you in 29? Is it Isak? I can foresee that, right? Jumping off of Isak to put Palmer in for 3 games and then back. Maybe that's what you're looking at. Ultimately, do you want to captain Palmer? I think 28, no, but 27, you might want to. Liverpool playing Newcastle. My instinct at the moment is to probably stick with Mo for the armband out of 2, but Palmer, yeah, you come off and there'll be other people like captain him in 27. If Palmer has a good weekend this week, there'll be a number of people be sitting at this time next week when they captain him against Southampton. It will soon change like that. So I don't mind. I think ultimately, Johan, your decision is to be made after this weekend. You'll probably know quickly after the Saturday evening game how you feel. Shout out FPL Frost. Hope you're well, buddy. CJ Stuck 07 says, morning, James. On assistant manager slot since 24. Plan to use no chips in 29. Have Gakpo on 1 free transfer. Don't know whether to sell him to Cunha, change slot to Arteta or roll. What's your preference? I think under that one, Gakpo to Cunha. But again, there's the consequence of, are you benching something that looks really good this week? Could it wait? Would Gakpo maybe be useful for you in 27, 28? I don't think we can know the answer till probably Friday on that one. My instinct would be probably, yeah, go early Cunha. Probably, and save the Arseman transfer. Mark says, does the emergence of Marmoush make you less likely to go for Haaland in 29? Will he take points from Haaland? He may take some points from Haaland. Excuse me, but he may also aid more points for Haaland, right? Because he's a good player. I said I mentioned Marmoush earlier when I was talking about them other forwards, but I think he's on the pathway. He's probably below all of them because of the less security of minutes, right? Let's not forget, okay, he scored a hat-trick at the weekend, but he didn't start against Real Madrid last week. Now, if you're not starting against Real Madrid, there has to be question marks if you are actually truly part of Pep's best 11. So I think it's slow down for this moment would be the advice there. But he's certainly an asset that needs watching in the build-up and run up to game week 29. No doubt about that. I don't think, has a huge influence on it. Ultimately, I could buy Marmoush in 29 rather than Haaland, save a load of money, but Marmoush doesn't start and I'm a 1-pointer, and then I've got a problem to deal with as he's starting against Leicester in 30. Ultimately, whatever I invested in City, I'd want it to play those 2 games in particular. Then they may have a double in 33, so it's carrying. Then it might become difficult to sell and move on if he's not a starter. It could be a headache. That's a reality. Paul Dolan says, hi James, if you had all the chips left bar assistant manager, and given what we know now regarding double game weeks, when would be the best time to use a triple captaincy? I think, as someone said earlier, I'd possibly be hoping I could get 4 fixtures out the assistant manager at the end. So, you know, something like Manchester United make the FA Cup final. They're still in Europe after the quarterfinals. We know then, say, Chelsea United gets brought forward to 36. Maybe you take a chance on Chelsea against Newcastle and Manchester United, right? It's not great, but it's 2 fixtures, and then you chain it on for a couple looking for bonus at the end, right? Maybe that's the way you look at it. Maybe Brighton against the Liverpool team that might already have the League One in 37, right? Might be resting players. There might be stuff like that at the end of the season that really appeals, where there's bonus involved, right? Maybe Fulham against a Manchester City team, or the Manchester City team that are preparing for an FA Cup final, or just come out of an FA Cup final weekend before and they don't give a shit about their season in 38, right? There's a few. Wolves is one I've highlighted where if they were still in the shit right at the end, they could. It's unlikely, but in theory, Brighton, Palace, Brentford could all be bonus fixtures in their last 3 games if they're right in trouble. It's unlikely, but you will get something out of that involves a bonus. Should we treat a bonus almost effective as like an extra fixture because of the size of what it could be? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just kind of talking out loud. You know, if Glasner had 5 fixtures, 31 to 33, and they're all bonus, Do we consider that as like 10? Well, probably not, because of the difficulty of the games, right? I think if I had everything left, I know that everything is best in 33. I probably would be drawn to want to bench boost in 33. Probably. Therefore, I would maybe want a triple captain on Isak in 32 if I hadn't used it. Therefore, I would maybe be looking at wildcard in 31. You should at least know the layout by that point, we think. Again, I've spoken previously about the dangers of the 30 wildcard. By the way, if you're thinking, James, you expressed like real concern about wildcard in 30, but you're talking about maybe wildcarding in 29, I don't have to set for a bench boost or anything, right? That's the danger. That's what really concerns me. Those who are wildcarding to set for a bench boost when they're wildcarding in 30, that's what concerns me. For those who've used the bench boost and be less concerned about it, because if it ends up wrong, that team doesn't double, then maybe it's just a shit single fixture and you bench them and then they're useful for you in 34. It depends on your strategy, right? Yeah, I'd possibly be looking at the moment wildcard 31, triple captain 32, bench boost 33, free hit 34, arse man across 35 to 37 or 36 to 38. I think there's a chance that Pep, as an example here, 35 to 37, there's a chance here that you could end up with a scenario where you had Pep at home to Wolves, then double Southampton away and Bournemouth at home. If the Bournemouth game got brought forward to the midweek due to the FA Cup final, there's a little concern about rotation at that point, but it'll be what it'll be. And then you punt something again that's potential bonus, maybe in 37, maybe something like Tottenham at Villa, for example, maybe. I don't know. It's so far away to be thinking about the bonuses kind of at this point. But yeah, I would maybe try and take that sort of strategy route with it. But again, I think the decision for final usage on chips really arrives after the FA Cup 5th round, and then it's game 28. Don't commit to a definitive decision yet. It's my strongest bit of advice. Next up says Hanny, hi James. Start 2 between Trent, Robinson, Howson. Never bench Trent. I wouldn't say never bench Trent. And again, what's the context here? We mentioned one earlier. Have you got Cunha, for example, going against Howson? I think Howson being a centre back, I'd want to go with the fullbacks. I think that would be my instinct. Wolves are decent. We've seen that last week. Ian PTSD says, morning James, hope you're well and half term isn't too noisy. He's doing well. He's at Kids Club for the majority of this week. What are the key dates to keep in mind when trying to finalise chip strategies? Egg we should know about game week 34 by. Okay, I'll just clarify that. So again, as said, FA Cup 5th round between 27 and 28. So 27 members midweek next week. And then the FA Cup 5th round is the weekend. So the following Monday or Tuesday, and to be honest, we'll probably do the Tuesday because Forest play on the Monday night, and I do think that's particularly relevant. So we'll probably do the Tuesday afterwards. We'll look at chips again, and then we'll kind of lock in all the ideas then, because that's in the build up to game at 28. So between the Tuesday game at 28 and I think it's a Saturday deadline that week, might be a Friday, but it's a few days then, I think, to gather that information and make decisions then to confirm that. Obviously, at that point, you also know what the FA Cup quarter-final lineup is. In terms of knowing who will blank in game week 34, you should know before game week 30. However, you might not factually know. So I've given the example already of Newcastle Ipswich, right? We can assume, okay, Newcastle reached semi-final, Newcastle Ipswich postponed. Is it going to get brought forward with others to game week 33? We can project that, but we might not know. And it might just be the midweek afterwards. Remember, probably won't be a TV game. Neither team in Europe, in theory, could be anywhere. So could it just stay in 34, right? So you might be, Newcastle double 33 and I've got to cover this, that and the other because they're going to blank 34, and then ultimately they've got a difficult fixture at Villa in 33 and then a great fixture 34. Like, it could flip like that. I don't think we will factually know what game week 33 looks like and 34 exactly until after the game week 30 deadline. I strongly think as well there's a good chance that the game week 30 deadline will be brought forward from the Tuesday to the Monday. I think there's a strong chance Liverpool against Everton or Chelsea against Tottenham will be on the Monday night that week. So FA Cup quarter-final Sunday, you're relying on an announcement on the Monday. That's That's what I keep saying about people wildcarding that week. What's the info? If you're setting to bench boost, what's the info? Game week 31 deadline will almost certainly be the Saturday rather than the Friday. We've obviously had this spate of announcements on the Friday. And to be honest with you, that's what I think the most likely thing is. We'll get everything announced probably for near enough the rest of the season, bar games impacted by the FA Cup final, probably on the Friday before game week 31 deadline. Can I tell you that factually? No, I don't work for the Premier League. I can't say with certainty. But if you get the info prior to the 30 deadline, you're very lucky. If it didn't arrive before the 31 deadline, I'd be fairly astonished. You've got to think from the 31 deadline of that weekend, the weekend of 33 is only 2 weeks later. So if you're arranging a game for the midweek afterwards in real time here, this is real calendar time, that's only 2.5 weeks later. So you might have teams making long journeys like Ipswich to Newcastle. Come on, give them the information, get on with it. It's very unlikely you wouldn't get it for the 31 deadline. In terms of the final 35, so the semi-finals are in 34. Again, you'll have 2 games postponed from the weekend in 37. Most likely might only be one if, say, a Burnley makes an FA Cup final. But likely 2 games postponed. That's from the 34 weekend. 35 deadlines the following weekend. Again, surely you know if there's going to be, say, doubles then in 36 and blanks in 37 before the 35 deadline. That's your layout. Jack says, hi, should I captain Visser? If you want to. I think there is certainly a case for some rogue ones this week. Visser, Bumo, the Bournemouth attackers, Mikel Merino. If you're feeling really brave, please not a Tottenham player. Beto. There are some rogue... I can't believe I said that. There are some rogue ones you could consider this week. I think ideally, yes, from Brentford or Bournemouth if you were to take that rogue view. I don't think there's many weeks you would consider Vissers or Kluiverts for captaincy. This week, they do come into contention if you fancy it. Ultimately, my answer would be no, Jack. Nemanja says, hello, James. So I use my 1 free transfer on slot. Who should I go for? Thank you for your question, Nemanja. I think I've covered, so I'm going to skip. Harmonic says, not heard you bring up the rule change this season, letting you carry over free transfers through wildcard free hit. I'm thinking of stocking up wildcard 32. Then have 4 or 5 transfers for a good bench boost 33, free hit 34. There's no way that I haven't mentioned it across the season, mate, and it's absolutely valuable and beautiful, right? So I'd possibly be looking at wildcard in 29 with 3 free transfers that would then get used for me later on if I decide to take this path. And by the way, I've not committed to it, but I have looked at it and I do quite like it for me personally and the problems that I have. So it's a consideration for me. And yes, that's brilliant, mate. That changes the game, right? So, for example, wildcard 29 or 30, again, if you're doing it to bench boost, it's meh. But let's say you're trying to run through and just committing towards 33 teams you think will double and you steam into the doubles. If you've got 5 free transfers on the other side to then deal with a blank, that obviously helps with maybe not needing to use a free hit, right? And someone like me who doesn't have the free hit, I need to manage 33 and 34 unless my other alternative is the wildcard in 34 itself. Just steam towards 33, wildcard away from it. Hanny says Gakpo in bench for Dango, Isak and Wood to start. Yeah, I mean, play Wood over Gakpo, I think, this week. Yeah. Colin Johnson says I might play Rodgers or Sell for Dango or keep and play Pedro. Sorry, I'm trying to work out what the relationship with João Pedro here is to Rodgers and Dango Tara. Are you saying you want to play João Pedro over Rodgers? Only if you think he starts, mate. Only if you think he starts. But by virtue of you even saying that, that suggests to me that you probably want to move Rodgers on, so I probably would. Samson Barreto says Raul Jimenez to Visser, worth this week, or Cunha next week, or keep Raul. I think I would view that and say, across the next 4 game weeks, running towards 29, is there enough gain in Visser over Jimenez over those 4 weeks? You may also be free hitting in 29. Well, they both land terribly in game week 30, so you're probably selling either in 30. So then which one's better over the next 3? I'd say it's close. Therefore, I probably wouldn't make the change. I'd stick with what I had at this stage of the season. JP says, should I sell Ahmad to a second Bournemouth midfielder or Nwaneri? The preference for me is Bournemouth mid. money might be really important for you, JP. I totally get those trying to force in, say, Haaland for 29. That million difference, or million and a half difference between, say, Nwaneri and Cliver, like, could be a really big deal. So I get that. So that needs factoring into your thinking. But ultimately, it depends in terms of how far you think you're running after 29. We do expect Saka back for a period where Arsenal have really good fixtures. What's the impact? Is there a possibility? Consider this, and we spoke about this earlier in the week and last week on Clash of Correspondence. What if Palace make the FA Cup semi-finals and Arsenal Palace gets brought forward to 33? Might you want to use the assistant manager chip on Arteta? Now, if you've got, under that circumstance, if Arsenal then got a double in 33 of Ipswich away and Palace at home, do you not want Saka? Do you not want Gabriel? We probably at least want them too. And does Nwaneri block you off of a third, a Marino, a Saliba, a Raya, Arteta, assistant manager? Just factor that in. He's an incredible talent, like genuinely phenomenal. A complete given in terms of a great choice as a 4.5 million midfielder. I just think, thinking further ahead, just think of other factors. And ultimately, Saka and Martinelli back, he's probably not starting. That's probably where it's at. It probably goes back to Trossard, Martinelli, Saka, most likely. So how long do you need it for? If it's really short term, just like next 3-4 game weeks, I have no problem with you buying Nwaneri at all. Top 10 travel says, hi James, is it worth moving Rodgers out the team given that I'll only have 10 players available in 29? Yeah, look, the obvious solution is a Rodgers to a Bournemouth player, but if you've got doubts, I don't think there's anything wrong with holding Rodgers to give yourself a bit more information. What I mean by that is you might be really kind of unsure on which Bournemouth player. You might want to keep Rodgers for the next 3. I don't think they're a terrible set of 3 fixtures. Chelsea at home, Palace, Brentford away. And then go to your Bournemouth player in 29, for example. Or maybe it'd be something different. Maybe Nwaneri, right? So if in doubt, maybe just hold on, mate. Hanny says Palmer, Gordon and Cunha, or Haaland, Dango and Semenyo from 29. I think it's still the Palmer route, actually. I think Palmer has great fixtures from 30 to 34, with the exception of maybe Fulham away 33. But you'll be looking at doublers that week, so you can move Palmer on in 33, or you might bench him that week, or play him. He might be in great form, and you're like, no, I'm playing Palmer at Fulham. That's perfectly reasonable. I think that combination's better. You've got Gordon with, could be back-to-back doubles, 32, 33. We know the doubles there, certainly in 32. And Cunha, as said numerous times, the fixtures are absolutely fantastic. So I prefer that. That's my take at the moment. Patrick Benjaminson says, hi James, worth doing Diaz out for Bumo and Emery to Glasner, Arteta from -4, just do the manager transfer. That's interesting. You just prefer the manager transfer. Because I think Luis Diaz, I'd be really pleased with the points at the weekend. I'd be very happy to be selling that at this moment. And I'd prefer that, particularly if you're on a path heading towards 29. I'd probably just prefer you did that. -4 for me, no. FPL Uproar says, hello James, Gakpo to Cunha or Rodgers to Nwaneri or Dango, cheers. I can't really answer it, my friend, because as I said, I've not totally made up my mind and it's a similar deliberation for me. So Gakpo to Cunha or Diallo to Cliver, etc. This one a little different in the sense, obviously, you've got use out of Rodgers. Therefore, I probably prefer for you at this moment probably to make the Cunha move. Greg Williams says, hi James, best tactic for someone with just free hit and assistant manager left after accidentally activating wildcard instead of assistant manager in game week 24. Cheers. I know that feeling of doing things by accident, mate, so you have my sympathy. Free hit and assistant manager left. I think it depends what your team is now, right? That's really important. Like, how bad does 29 look? If you can manage 29 well, then I think it's AM 31 to 33 and free hit 34. Poke Master Marcello says, 1. Will the FA Cup semi-finalists double in 33 or will their 34 fixtures be played midweek or 34 if they're not in Europe? Can't answer that because I don't factually know, but I think you've heard me cover this subject already in the podcast, so I'll skip. But thank you for the question. Trash Bandicoot says, hi, James. No question. Just wanted to say I love the content, bro. Very informative. Your memory is remarkable. Thank you very much, mate. It's truly appreciated. Frankie says, James, how do you view saving the transfer versus transferring slot out this week? I'm leaning towards the first being more beneficial in the longer term. Yeah, again, I think I've covered this, Frankie. So if you've joined a bit late, I have a listen back to some of the earlier parts of the stream. I've kind of covered exactly that. Josh Davis says, morning, James. Loving the chip strategy pods at the moment. Just wondering how far in advance you think it's worth playing till game week 35, maybe. I mean, on the video that I've done for the advanced tier patrons that will be out later on Patreon, I run to 38. With someone like me who ain't got many chips to change shit about, I possibly need to think that far ahead. So there are variables that will move along the way, particularly around 33, 34, but otherwise that's it. Now, I don't think you should plan to 38, really, because I think there's so much that can change, but I need to be so careful with my transfers. Now, if you plan to wildcard in 34, 35, which is probably more likely what I still end up doing, I only need to plan to 33, right? That's a dead end. But ultimately, you've got to be aware of the consequences between 33 and 34 and what can change. And after the FA Cup 5th round, we can really say it's this or it's this. And that will be different parts. But that now there's just too many. It's still too many permutations. Remember, we've only got 2 games definitely locked in for game week 34 as it stands. After the 5th round, we might have Arsenal Palace locked in if Palace lose to Millwall. We'll have Forest and Brentford locked in if Forest lose to Ipswich, right? There's more cases of that, obviously. Brighton against West Ham if Brighton lose at Newcastle. So many more games. Newcastle and Ipswich if they both get knocked out. So many more games that could get locked to 34. And the picture becomes tighter and clearer. And then we might have either ors. So, for example, we might have a scenario where... try and find a good situation here, James. So, for example, let's say Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup quarterfinals are going to play Crystal Palace. Okay, that's a possibility, I think, at the moment, the way that those 2 teams favour to go through. Right, so let's say Forest are playing Palace in the FA Cup, not 5th round, sorry, FA Cup quarterfinal. At that point then, we know that we're guaranteed to lose one of Forest v Brentford or Arsenal v Palace from 34. We know that in the Arsenal Palace case, it's highly likely to get put forward to 33. Less so in the Forest Brentford case. But then we can have so much more of a clearer picture once we get to that point. So it's so important. Charles says, hi, James. How many teams will double in 36 is your viewpoint? Thanks. I think the most likely is 2 teams. So 1 additional game in there. Be that's something that's pushed back, or more likely 1 fixture maybe from 37 is brought forward. There are definitely scenarios. Like I said, let's say the FA Cup final was Villa against Manchester United. If Manchester United and Tottenham are still in Europa League at the semi-final stage, then those 2 fixtures are both getting brought forward to 36, and I can tell you that with certainty. So it depends on the who. At the moment, my projection would be a City-Newcastle final, Manchester City, obviously, and a Newcastle final. And I think under that circumstance, I think it's more likely those 2 fixtures would be pushed back to just later in game week 37. And therefore, that's why currently there are 0 projected doubles in game week 36. I think the most likely and the safest answer for me to give you is that it'll probably be 1 extra game in 36. Definitely could be 2. There are still scenarios where it could be more, but it's also a strong scenario where it's 0. CM Punk 2310 says, what would be more priority to move on would be for a hit, and Dyer or Ahmad? Best replacement 0.5 in the bank. Next week we'll have 2 million after getting back the amount from the assistant manager. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm trying to think of solutions for you. So there's probably not much from Dyer. Whereas next week, once you've got the money back, and Dyer to Cunha will look pretty straightforward. So therefore, it's probably deal with the Diallo first, and you do have other players in and around that. So Utara is obviously cheaper, right? You might be able to go Semenyo. So I think it's probably, it's Diallo first, Bournemouth strong fixture this week. Deal with that first. And then once your money's back in place, I think, and die to Cunha. That feels right to me. Right, I'm going to cover two more I can see on my screen as we have hit 12 o'clock. Matt Gilbert says, one of the good things to come out of Spurs season is presumably the game time for Archie Gray. Do you see him as your long-term answer to play 6? If so, do you think he'll play there for England? I'm not sure about Archie at 6. I think it's something we definitely should be trying in league games between now and the end of the season. I'm not sure about him. I've only really seen him play there once, and he didn't go well. Now, the opponent was a pressing and energetic Bayern Munich in a pre-season game. And to be honest, it got to the point. If it had been a proper football match with half hour gone, you'd have had to take him out of that position. He obviously got left there till half time. Honestly, it was that bad. Not so much for him, right? It was the first time he played it for us, and you had this opponent that was just swarming proper experienced players like Müller, plus the pace and energy of people like Matthias Tell played for Bayern and was outstanding in that half of football. He definitely is capable in the longer term. I maybe see more of an 8 in the longer term, but Tottenham definitely have to look at it because the 6 is a position that must have improvement and an upgrade next season. And if the vision is for Archie Gray to play that position, then we've got to start integrating it during a period where, as I said, in the league games, what remains. I mean, what do we need? 4 points to stay up? Okay, probably be all right, I imagine. And in terms of like qualifying for Europe, they're so unlikely. We probably, to qualify, I think, for even the Conference League, I think we'd probably have to win probably minimum of 8 games of what's left. Yeah, we ain't doing that. so there's pretty much nothing for us to play for. So we really have got to be, I think, a little bit inquisitive about what happens next. If obviously he does really well in the 6th position for Tottenham, then it's an automatic that he will end up playing that position for England at some stage. Because if you're English and you play well for Tottenham, you get in the England squad. Everybody knows that, right? Finally, Oni Doty says, hi James, with the amount of matches that Premier League clubs can play, can you see the League Cup, Carabao Cup being scrapped at some point? No. Because it's too valuable to the EFL, and ultimately it is the EFL's decision. The only way that changes is if there's an agreement with the Premier League where the Premier League and the Football Association were to give the EFL a large compensation package to lose the game. What you have to think here is this is so important, and we've covered this on our Money in Football podcast on Patreon. The EFL, the Carabao Cup games, are part of the EFL package, particularly for television, right? So the EFL sells their television package. Currently, it all goes to Sky, but obviously in other territories, it goes to other companies. So Sky in this country pick up the EFL games, the Championship, League 1, League 2. It's all theirs to do what they want with. They've now got this Sky Plus channel where they show every team at least 20 times, right? Part of that, they also get the Carabao Cup, which includes the final. Very important. It's most of the prestigious games of the season, and obviously semi-finals. And when you have years like you've got 4 massive clubs like Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, Newcastle in the semi-finals, these as a profile are bigger than any game in the EFL. They're in terms of a selling package, they're bigger, arguably even than the Championship playoff final. I know the value of what the Championship playoff final is, but from a selling television rights package, these games are huge. So if someone's analysing it now, you go, well, look at what we had in the semi-finals and the final this year. Look at what the value of this is. So if you take away the Carabao Cup, you're taking those TV rights and the money they earn from that away from the EFL. Why are they going to give their competition up? This is why we still got 2-leg semi-finals as well. So until the Premier League and the FA can agree a deal, which is a huge compensation fee for the EFL, it continues. Personal opinion, keep the competition. Clubs who enter Europe don't enter it. But that also needs a compensation package for the EFL, because if you look at this season, again, and those 4 semi-finalists, right, well, there's only one of those 4 semi-finalists could have made it, and that's Newcastle. And obviously, whichever team wins that cup would automatically qualify for Europe the next season, so they couldn't make it the next season. So you are taking something away still from their package, even if you did that, because we're not going to have Liverpool and Man United in the semi-finals, right? So the value of it diminishes. Genuinely, those 2 semi-finals, the 4 semi-finals effectively, because it's 2 legs, and the final are so important as a package to the EFL. And of course, there's the other rounds as well, but particularly those at the end, I think, especially. So as it stands, on it, no. My opinion would be that I think clubs who qualify for Europe shouldn't enter it. So, for example, Newcastle would have entered it this year. Next year, there's every chance Tottenham and Manchester United would enter it, right? This would be my solution. All right, I think that's all for Ask James. For anyone who's questioned, I've not got to. I know there's a number of you. Apologies. Please feel free to tag me on Twitter, X, or Blue Sky at Planet FPL Pod, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions there. As said, tomorrow, Clayton and James show include discussion on tonight. It's worked quite well because we can talk Villa Liverpool tomorrow, and we'll talk obviously the City Madrid game, a few points from Champions League game, watched quite a bit of football last night. Also going to do obviously Euro focus on this day. We've got a bit of a feature as well we're going to do tomorrow on Descent. And obviously, as said, Friday Clash of Correspondence is with our Fulham correspondent, Lewis James, and our Crystal Palace correspondent, Rory McLaughlin-Dowd. And I can tell you, I do think that Lewis, because I've just seen his message in the chat, I do think he used the assistant manager chip on Marco Silva over the last 2 weeks, which was obviously the biggest return you could have had from an Arseman over the last 2 weeks. If you're on YouTube, smash a like, hit the sub button. For the audio listeners, 5-star review goes a really long way. Be nice to each other, everyone. Play it your way. Cue music, please, man child.